Just other housekeeping issues. So if you agree with what we do as activism, one of the things you can do is you can join one of our groups, so Source for Palestine, Palestinian Solidarity Group, and join PPP as well. So today we are really fortunate. We have three outstanding speakers. We're going to talk about Syria, Palestine, and imperialism. Imperialism is, if we look at a basic definition, would be a policy of expansion of a country, of domination of other countries, other populations through occupation, colonialism, and other means. And we can all agree that in those other means, we can include the first mean genocide, ethnic cleansing, racism, and etc. So today we're going to talk about these about imperialism at play in the region of Palestine, Syria, and why Syria, what is happening in Syria, why it actually matters to Palestine, and why it actually matters to us as well. So we have three great speakers. Jacqueline, Kelly. Jacqueline, you're living in Source. You've been living in Source for 16 years, and you're very much part of the community. You have kids going to local schools. And we met in the context of the solidarity with the Palestinian people. So we're going to bring the view of the people, of the activists. Richard Boyd Barrett, TD, People for Profit, member of the parliament, that's TD. I did not know that when I came to my first. What is T, what is D? And Samir, Aita, among a lot of things, you are a Syrian, that's a good starting point. Yeah. And you are a political analyst, and you are the former chief editor of Le Monde Diplomatique, an institution in Arabic, and you are a co-founder of the Democratic Syrian Forum. So please join me in welcoming our three speakers. If it's okay with you, I'm going to start probably with Richard, if that's okay with you.
What do you want?
Yeah, we want. If you're happy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much for inviting me to speak this evening. I'm delighted to be two other great speakers, and I'm very keen to hear what they have to say and what you have to say, what thoughts you have on the current situation. How long should I speak for? Just tell me, Zach.
It's 20 minutes.
Oh, that's too long. That's too long. I'm surprised. It's 20 minutes each. I think people will be making for the door at the end. Will we say 10 each? Or is that 10 each? Isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so look, the first thing I know that we're talking to friends here, and we're talking to people who've been out on the protests and the demonstrations over the last year against the horror that has been inflicted on the people of Gaza, most particularly, but on the people of Palestine in general, by the Israeli regime and their Western enablers, the United States, the European Union, the UK, and any and all governments that have given Israel impunity, not just for the crimes that the horrendous, unspeakable crimes they have committed over the last 15 months, but that have given Israel impunity for decades of brutal occupation, of ethnic cleansing, of the most horrific persecution of the Palestinian people, dating at least back to the formation of the Israeli state in 1948, and in fact before that, when Zionist terror gangs enabled by British imperialism were running around preparing for the mass ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people and the theft of their land as part of a colonial project to steal the land of the Palestinians and establish a colonial outpost for British imperialism, subsequently inherited by American and Western imperialism. And that is why, in short, or, you know, in putting it in the simplest terms, and I think most people here know this, why we have had the horror that we have witnessed. It didn't start on October the 7th. That is the real context. That is the real reason for the absolutely horrific genocide that we have seen. And that horror is just a logical extension of the apartheid colonialist settler project that has been inflicted on the people of Palestine. And we saw its most shocking and obscene manifestation over the last 15 months, where Israel is willing to massacre, 47,000 people, but in fact, I think we all know the death toll is far higher. The Lancet is suggesting that it's probably more like 65 or 70 or even 80,000 people. 6,200. Yeah, and 100, well over 100,000 people named and injured. It's just, there's no words can describe it. And against that background, I do think it is very important to say that the ceasefire that has taken hold, or that has been announced, is a victory for the resilience and the resistance of the Palestinian people and for the global movement of solidarity, which we have seen erupt across the world, horrified by the crimes being committed against the Palestinian people. And I do think it is important to say that it is, it's hard to use words like victory in the context of genocidal massacre, but I don't think we should be under any illusion that the Israeli regime was more than willing to massacre lots more people, and that their agenda has always been the elimination of the Palestinian people as a national group. And that has always been the agenda of the Zionist project, is to expel the Palestinian Arab population and to settle the greater Israel as they see it, to steal all of Palestine. So against that background, it is simply incredible that the Palestinian people have resisted the way they have. The resilience, there's just no words to describe their heroism, as far as I'm concerned, in the face of this genocidal onslaught. But it's also great credit to all of the people who marched. And sometimes, I really do want to emphasize this, there is an attempt to demoralize activists, to demoralize anybody who resists oppression, colonialism, war, imperialism, to demoralize them and say there's no point in marching, there's no point in resisting. And I really want to urge people to resist that and to recognize that while we're a very, very long way from the liberation of Palestine, what people did, most importantly, the resistance of the Palestinians themselves and the global movement of solidarity, mark millions of people across the world, tens of millions of people, makes a difference. It has exposed Israel's narrative. It has exposed the complicity of the Western governments, without whom they would not be able to commit the crimes that they commit. And it has put them on the defensive and forced them into a situation of having to announce a ceasefire. And that is a tremendous tribute to the Palestinian people and to those who have supported them. And it's why, if I say nothing else, it is important that we continue to stay on the streets. While there's going to be a demonstration tomorrow with people coming up from around the country to demand that the government pass the Occupied Territories Bill, and I'll get on to what they're doing about that in a moment, but I don't think I need to tell you that we're going to have to fight to get what is actually a minimal sanction on Israel, not for all of its crimes, not for apartheid, not for the siege of Gaza, not for the decades of ethnic cleansing, but just to stop trade with settlements that are recognized to be illegal under international law. But even that they want to roll back on commitments that were made during the course of the election to dilute it. And I think increasingly already signs that they are bending the knee to the Trump administration in relation to that. And the fact that Trump has also announced today that he is going to roll back on absolutely minimal, pathetic, nothing sanctions that Biden had imposed supposedly on Israel for the illegal settlements, which was nothing, because we know Biden is up to his neck in the genocide. It couldn't have been committed without the weapons and the finances that Biden gave to the regime. But the fact that Trump is talking about even rolling back on the most minimal criticism and action, directed by the previous US administration against Israel for illegal settlements tells you where things are going and why it is important we're on the streets and on the national demonstration on Saturday, where we need to see tens of thousands of people out. And I think that's particularly important in the context that they are already trying to shift the narrative. The sheer horror and obscenity of what we have seen led millions of people, hundreds of thousands, unprecedented numbers of people onto the streets to get organising in the length and breadth of the country, horrified and suddenly, seeing the reality of the shocking double standards of the European Union, of Western governments, of our own government, and their complicity with that horror, and that brought people onto the streets. But now they want to, as soon as they can, and we can see all the signs, they want to shift the narrative back to saying, well, now we've got a ceasefire, the real problem is Hamas, right? And we're already hearing it. It was on the television tonight. I don't know if you saw Dana Ehrlich, the Israeli ambassador, being interviewed. And this was the thing. Oh, yes, of course, she was mouthing the lie that this was all begun by Hamas on October the 7th. And you have, I won't say an uncritical interview by RTE. There was some criticism levelled at Dana Ehrlich, but there was still that kind of conceding ground to the idea that actually really, if it wasn't for Hamas, maybe all this wouldn't have happened. And so shifting that narrative, and of course, one sign, very, very worrying sign, that is the direction that this government is going, is the quite, even for me, shocking announcement that the government wants to adopt the the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism. And again, I don't think I need to explain to you what that is. That is a definition that is being promoted and campaigned for and sponsored by the supporters of Israel and Zionism to essentially make impossible any criticism of Israel and claim it is anti-Semitism. Now, on the RT news bulletin tonight, Dana Ehrlich was sort of saying, well, no, it doesn't mean you can't criticize Israel, but then very quickly went on to say that even from her point of view, the Irish government's recognition of the state of Palestine amounted to an unfair persecution of Israel, and what she was effectively saying it is anti-Semitism, and in a way proving the point about this definition. Of course, we all should abhor anti-Semitism and any form of racism. Of course, it is entirely justified to challenge it, and indeed to have definitions of anti-Semitism, but there are other definitions. The Jerusalem definition, for example, which was put together by Palestinian and Jewish and other academics and experts in this area, which is a proper definition of anti-Semitism. But this one is a completely partisan, pro-Zionist definition, which moves from saying anti-Semitism is a problem, which of course it is, to saying that if you, for example, suggest that the Israeli state project is a racist endeavor, that you are actually guilty of anti-Semitism. Now, I just want to be absolutely clear, the Israeli state project is a racist endeavor. And I'm not anti-Semitic in saying it. In fact, it's precisely because we're anti-racists that we say that the entire Israeli state project was based on creating an ethno-state which discriminated on the basis of religion and ethnicity and relegated Palestinians to being second class, essentially subhumans who then could be ethnically cleansed, killed, persecuted, imprisoned, expelled to the four corners of the world, left to rot in refugee camps in Syria and Lebanon and Beirut and so on. We are going to have to explain this, though, to people. Because a lot of the people that were on the streets won't necessarily know this stuff. Many of the people in this room know this stuff, but may not people beyond who come out on the streets, who have learnt a lot, and who are shocked and horrified, may not know that deeper history. And what is the real context for the horror that we've seen? And really what I want to say to people is, number one, we've got to stay on the streets. We've got to say a ceasefire is only the beginning. We need accountability for the crimes that Israel has committed and for its enablers in the United States and Europe and so on. And that the only way we will actually prevent a repeat of the genocidal horror that was inflicted on the Palestinians is if we dismantle that entire regime, exactly as eventually, under pressure of the resistance of black South Africans and an international boycott and solidarity movement, finally the world was forced, and the supporters, international supporters of apartheid South Africa, were forced to acknowledge it was an apartheid regime and that it had to be dismantled. We have to explain that there is going to be no just settlement or end to the sort of horror we've seen unless we get to that point and recognise that fact. Now, that is very, very obvious to the people here, I think, but that is not. We are going to be strongly challenged and resisted on that interpretation of events. So we are going to see them going on about two-state solutions, and certainly people may want to debate this. I believe the two-state solution is nothing but a con trick that was put together by the Western powers to try and suggest that there's some legitimacy to apartheid Israel and to the ethnic cleansing of Palestine that has taken place since 1948. And we have to call that out. Because on the surface of it, if you don't know much about it, you might think two states, fair enough, we'll have a Jewish state and we'll have a state for the Palestinians, and wouldn't that be a fair outcome? But in actuality, what that does is legitimizes the ethnic cleansing of millions of Palestinians who've been made refugees and have been living as refugees, stateless and in exile since 1948. It would end their right to return, and it would legitimize a system that is based on apartheid, which the Israeli state is root and branch, based on a system of apartheid, racism, and so on. And I've probably gone over my 10 minutes, so I'll try and conclude in this. How does all that relate to the sort of bigger question of imperialism? And when you think that this is the few days when Trump is being inaugurated as the US president, and you look at the sort of debate and narrative around that, and I'm sure Samir will talk more about Syria, but what is actually happening? Well, we're seeing in a really sort of very stark way, it seems to me, the ratcheting up of the inter-imperialist tensions and of really an exposing of the imperialist system that really lies at the back of all of this horror. And not just what has been done to the Palestinians, but in fact, decades and decades, if not hundreds of years of imperialism visited on people in the developing world, in Africa, and all over the world. And you see that the contours of the different big imperial powers jockeying for position and control of spheres of influence for their own selfish and strategic interests. I mean, to me, it's kind of summed up where you have Trump, on the one hand, talking about rolling back on any sanctions on Israel, absolutely sort of unashamedly backing Israel, and we know that's the Trump position, but also then talking about taking Greenland, taking back the Panama Canal, so a fairly explicit statement of intent to control spheres of influence in the interests of American capitalism, which again is being laid bare as Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, I can't remember half the rest of their names, but billionaires, oligarchs, nakedly running these people steal their resources in order to become disgustingly rich, and the American state, if you like, is their enforcer who uses its military might in order to further their interests on an international scale. So you have that, and then you have Davos, right? Supposedly the opposition. Supposedly, if you saw the news was presented today, you sort of have Trump, and you're horrified at everything Trump is saying, the racism, the anti-immigrant sentiment, the threats of expanding the American empire, backing Israel, but claiming somehow he's a champion of the small people in America, of the working people in America. And then you have the other side of the equation in Davos, Ursula von der Leyen, another sponsor of Israel, another apologist for the genocide, who from the minute the genocide commenced after October was backing Israel to the hilt, former defense minister for the German government, up to her neck in involvement in the defense industry, pumping arms from Germany into the biggest exporter from the European Union to Israel is Germany, giving them the weapons to commit the genocide and providing with the cover. And she sort of gets up today, and you see it on RTE, almost presenting herself as if she's some sort of liberal. Well, we've got to worry about Trump, but guess who we have to align with? We have to align with China. And you just start to think, okay, so we've got the Trump proto-dictator leaning towards fascism with his horrific agenda, but now we're being presented as Ursula von der Leyen as some liberal alternative to that, as she swans around with another gang of oligarchs and talking about teaming up with China, another brutal dictatorship, and India, a rotten right-wing regime that has gained power by using extreme sectarian politics and racism internally in India. Now, what I say to all of that to conclude is we need to oppose all forms of imperialism. Imperialism is precisely the voracious competition between big corporate interests for control of resources, for control of spheres of influence and markets, with big powers competing and emerging with states in order to grab spheres of influence at the expense of the mass of people in the world. And we shouldn't, in my opinion, people can talk about Syria, how it fits into this, start to think, well, there's good imperialists and there's bad imperialists. Because the truth is, they all have selfish strategic interests which are never about the oppressed of the world. And the real hope against this rather bleak situation that we are seeing, whether it's Trump or von der Leyen, the horror we've seen in genocide, is the mass movement we've seen on the streets in solidarity with Palestine, which is a movement not just against the horror visited on the Palestinian people, but actually is a movement, as we've all been saying, as the Palestinians say again and again, is a movement for all of humanity. Because if this can be done to the Palestinians, they will do it to other people. They've done it in the past to the people of Africa, they've done it in Latin America, they've done it everywhere. Everywhere they've got a chance to grab resources, in Vietnam, in Algeria, you could go through the list of how imperialism and different imperialist powers, usually trying to provide some spurious justification that they're exporting democracy or civilization, but in reality leaving a trail of bloodshed, of carnage, of brutal oppression, of sectarian division, of racism, of apartheid, and horror in their wake. The antidote to that is the movement we've seen on the streets. Millions, tens of millions, indeed maybe billions of people across the world acting in solidarity with the people of Palestine, but of all colours, of all creeds, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, people of no religion, people right across the political spectrum horrified that a supposedly civilized world is capable of doing the sort of horrors that we have seen committed, and recognising there's something fundamental and dangerous and terrifying if this is let pass. And that the system that produces that has to be challenged. And that's what I would conclude with. We have seen forces that have forced even these horrific powers to announce a ceasefire because they were forced into it. That is the power of the other superpower, the global superpower of people working people, ordinary people, the oppressed of the world, standing together and standing up against these imperialists and colonialists and racists. And that is what we need to build. That's what people before profit is interested in doing, but also aligning with other forces that have emerged across the world in unprecedented numbers, mobilizing on the streets. This is the movement that can save us from the sort of horrors that the Trumps, the Netanyahus, or for that matter, the Putins are willing to visit on the world in their selfish, strategic, imperialist interests. And if people see that as an existential battle that we do have to fight, and I think people should, I think it's very obvious that it's existential, what we're facing at the moment, then we need to build political organization and a movement that is going to fight against that sort of horrific logic and mentality, and fight for a society which is based on humanity, on the needs of ordinary people, and of sharing the world's resources in order to solve the problems that really matter of housing and health and clean water and the things that could actually enhance the quality of life of the majority of people in this world.
Indeed, U.S. government today with the Elon Musk of the world, there's no better illustration that imperialism is just the highest stage of capitalism. Thanks very much. Maybe Jacqueline, you know, give us your take.
Just don't ask me any questions about what Richard just said. We can take it from there. Can everybody see me? Is it like I don't have to stand up? Hello everyone, my name's Jacqueline. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. I'm originally from Scotland, but I've lived in Ireland now for almost 18 years. 16 of those have been spent in Swords, which is why I feel, well, that's one of the reasons perhaps why I've been invited to speak this evening as part of Swords Stand for Palestine. I'm very much in this community. My children are actually here in their Swords Manor and Fingalians here, so we are in as part of this community as we can be. Richard touched on something that it really is my intention to speak to you about tonight. But before I do so, if I may, can I see a show of hands of people here who are parents?
Who are?
Who are parents?
Parents.
Can I see a hand if there are aunts and uncles in this room? Okay. Can I see a hand raised if you have a parent who you have dearly and possibly still dearly love because they're alive or not, but if you have a parent that you love? Okay, so the place that I want to speak to is the feeling, is the place inside of you that is touched when you think of that person, your child, your parent, your niece or your nephew, whoever it may be. That's the part of you that I'm speaking to this evening. I am a mother of two, and I am no expert in politics. I'm not a politician, I'm not a world-renowned academic who can speak to politics and economics, but what I can speak to is the absolute refusal to continue to bear witness in silence of the genocide that we have seen unfold in our screens, on our screens for the last year and a half. We know it's been going on much longer. However, I'm speaking to the last year and a half because that's a big reason as to why I sit here this evening. So last year, back in the run-up to May last year, I was attending the national demonstrations. I was going in, but they weren't enough. Because for those of you who have jobs, who are busy, who have people to look after, it's not always possible to get into Dublin. It's not always possible to make the national demonstration. And I found that if I wasn't making that demonstration, the time between connecting with other people who I knew understood, who I didn't need to go into detail with and explain why I was crying, or I didn't need to explain why I was so angry and upset and furious. I didn't need to go into detail about it because they understood, because they were there too. So I started to look around in my local area, and as much as I hate to say this, I hate cliches, I always have, and what I hate about them is there's always that element of truth to it. And I looked around in Swords in about April, May last year, and I assumed with a town this size, there has to be a huge group of people here who are mobilising and standing in solidarity. Because I looked at other towns, I saw Cork and cities, and they had huge numbers of people. So I said, right, went online, Googling, Instagram a lot, couldn't find anything. And then felt a bit disheartened, sad. And then that cliche of you have to be the change. And I hate even saying this because it's so cheesy. But I'm going to leave you with that tonight. I'm going to say it to you again before we finish. But you have to, I have to be the change that I say I want to see in the world. So, came across a page on Instagram called Sword for Palestine. And I thought, okay, I'm going to contact this person. I don't know who it is, because I want to run a bridge. I want to stand at the bridge and wave a flag. If I have to do it myself, I will. So I reached out to Sword for Palestine, got no answer, and I wanted to join forces. I didn't want to stand on anybody's toes in case perhaps they were organising a bridge. I got no answer, so I went ahead with the bridge, and that was the first bridge that we ever did here in Swords, and that was in May. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a message back from Sword for Palestine. And the person, I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, I could tell how excited they were. They're like, I'm back, I've been out of the country, let's meet, we must meet and plan. And I had no idea who this was at this stage. And I was like, oh, who's this? And anyway, this person on the other said, I am Manel, and I'm a woman, so we can meet, it's safe, but it's okay. And we kind of laughed. And this is Manel here, the Swords for Palestine, the energy and the force behind it. She's got the phone in her hand. So I met with Manel, who had recently moved, and I don't want to speak for Manel, but I'm telling you my perception of it. She had moved here from Cork, so had come from such a powerhouse hub of activity that we're standing in public, shouting out loud, we will not be complicit in this, we will stand with the people of Palestine. So taking that energy, I went back to the bridge. And Marina, all the people that are dotted around this room, the bridge, we have not missed 1 week of the bridge since May last year. And it's not because I've been there every week, because I haven't, because again, I have kids, I have other things, commitment, responsibilities. But that bridge has not been missed because slowly but surely, more people started looking to their local area. What can I do? Where can I go? What difference can I make? And so we have a gathering of people who stand on that bridge every Friday, 7:30 in the morning till 8:30. Same, the castle. We had our first vigil outside the castle in June, a few weeks after the first one in the bridge. And we have gone from strength to strength to strength. We've had the pleasure and the privilege of joining forces with the Balbriggan stands in solidarity with Palestine too. And the thing that I believe that I was asked to speak to you about tonight is not the academics and the expertise. I have some of my own, but not in this area. It is the fact that we cannot keep looking to other people to do the very thing that we say needs to be done. Because if it's not being done and you can't see people doing it, at what point does it become our responsibility to do the thing? If not us, then who? And like what Richard touched on there about I've had so many messages from people saying, you are ridiculous. This is me putting it lightly because of course there's children in the room. You are ridiculous for standing on a bridge with a flag. What do you think you are achieving? And I would go home and question it, like, am I being that ridiculous that I can't even see it? I'm standing on a bridge in Swords, waving a flag for Palestine. And I came back to the very intention that I set when I set out to do the bridge that we do with Swords Castle. There is a ripple effect of every single conversation, every action, every flag that we wave. There is a ripple effect to that. And so by standing on that bridge, or by standing at the castle every Sunday from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and if you haven't been, by the way, you're all invited to come join us, of course. The ripple effect of that is huge because people drive by, they wave, they message, and some people have actually come and joined us. Aidan here was walking past the castle one Sunday, casually with a Palestine flag in his bag, and came and joined us. And this is how the people power, this is how we grow, this is how we solidify our base. To the point at which now you may have seen with the Sword for Palestine page, we have been instrumental, and I don't use that word lightly, in ASL, for ASL Airlines Ireland taking responsibility for their part in transporting munitions to Israel. And again, to go back to what I will always go back to is the power of the people. It's the community, it's the network. There was a woman who is part of North Wicklow Against Genocide, who I've met at the marches. So you can start to see all the threads that bind us together. I met Una at the marches. Una contacted me, said, there's an ASL office in Swords. You're in Swords. There's a big group in Swords. Can you deal with this? Took it to the Swords group. Everybody mobilised. And you know, we have mobilised strongly. We have hit back hard, again, collaborating with the Ditch, who are investigative journalists. So we are not going with misinformation. We are armed and prepared with facts, and we are using them to our advantage to the best of our ability. And the last thing that I want to say as well is that in every single revolution, every type of movement, there must be a wide selection, a wide spectrum of skill sets. We have our academics, we have our politicians, we have our medics, we have the people who will lead the charge, but we need the people who will go door to door. We need the people who will wave the flags. We need the storytellers. We need the healers. Every single one of us has a role to play in this. I'm still figuring out what my role is. I don't know. I'm hoping in time it will become clear, but I do know that there is work to be done. And if it's not us that's doing it, then who's going to do it? So it was lovely to see you all here tonight. And if you would like to know more, then please, our Sword for Palestine page, you can contact us on Instagram, come and speak to us after, if you're more local to Balbriggan. Des and Mary, Zach, they were more than happy to send you our social media information as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jacqueline. Actually, if not us, then who? I remember this one. Samir, you did not update your WhatsApp picture to the Syrian flag. You still have the Palestinian flag. Against.
This is one aspect. Good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to be with you. You don't imagine what you are saying, how your own struggle for combating the genocide, for the sake of Palestine, how it's encouraging many others in Europe. It's much more than what I can experience in France, where I live, and even in the Middle East. Fighting for the Palestinian cause is a crucial subject, and you shouldn't be discouraged by any means. Anyhow, and I will tell you why it's linked to Syria. The fight for Palestinians is linked. Syria is a complex story, but like whenever I read a complex book, I will start by the last chapter before we what happened recently. Netanyahu went to the UN Assembly, and going out there, he showed a picture, a map of cursed states, including Palestine, Palestinian territories, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. I will change the Middle East my way. Nobody reacted. Then taking the plane, he ordered the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. And whatever we think about the ideology of Hassan Nasrallah, he was among the rare people in the region supporting the Palestinians and pressing the Israelis to stop the war, while nothing was made. Hassan Nasrallah was a major figure, means the killing of whom, and afterwards destroying Hezbollah, destroying South Lebanon, destroying the South District of Beirut. I mean, not the genocide, because people could move to other places, but made destructions that would need 10 years to be delivered. When he accepted the ceasefire on Lebanon, he threatened Bashar al-Assad that he's playing with the fire, and an hour later, an army of jihadis came from Italy, conquered in a few hours Aleppo, while Aleppo was a fight for something like 7 years. He was organized not only by, like what you see in the media, by drones coming from Ukraine. He had the same electronic weaponization that Israelis used when they kicked on both Hamas and the Hezbollah. He took it in a few hours. And then he moved, and the Russians went into the game that was played. The Syrian army was disbanded. They took Damascus, and now they are in power. The Israelis took the occasion to bomb all Syrian military facilities, whatever rocket is only used, whichever tank, whichever airplane that was in Syria. And what is astonishing, while these jihadi groups were taking over Syria and the military bases, no one was injured in the Israeli bombing. This is very easy. And now they are in power. Of course, they are very much influenced and protected by the Turks. But also the Israelis took over on the demilitarized zone for us and moved. And they are now less than 20 kilometers from Damascus and asking for a security zone controlled by them getting over Damascus. What is funny in this complex game is that this Jolani, his jihadi name, changed to his original name, Ahmad Shara, make nice speeches meeting people from Western world, somewhere else, presenting the future of Syria like Dubai, what I call Dubai 3.0. He will have high-speed trains everywhere, environment friendly, so better than Donald Trump. While in fact, he is controlling with his group everything in Syria. He's kicking on Alawis and Shia. While the Alawis and Shia, as the army was dismantled, and even the people who lost their lives, being that Bashar al-Assad flew away without saying words to these people, that even the people who defended, they could have the whole Syrian population for them. So why they started to kick on some communities? Because they are, they have embedded within the group and around the group, because there are 30 groups of jihadis in Syria, people who are real jihadis and coming from Morocco, from Indonesia, etc., Western countries, including France, very little. Played a game in the Syrian civil war, and I say civil war, I will come back to the aspect of revolution later, to send all the jihadis of work to Syria to come back to this jihad country. And now, as they are jailed, for example, by the Kurdish militias in northeast Syria, nobody wants to take them back. Everybody is afraid of them. The French, the British, and etc. won't take their own guys. Even the ladies with their children after the men had been killed. Anyhow, this Ahmad Shara, he was ISIS. He was a terrorist. He could be some tribunal for killing. He was then Al Qaeda. Then 5 years ago, he was worked out. Imagine by whom? Your nice friend, British friends, Jonathan Howell, who is National Security Services UK, Karim Khalifa, this is a whatever. So, and now he has a British PR company who is telling him to build this, to buy 3.0 Korea, etc. But like an old proverb in Arabic, I hear what you are saying, it pleases me. I look what you are doing, and I'm astonished. It's an old proverb in Arabic. So this is the end of the story, and the people are happy in Syria, even getting rid of Bashar al-Assad, because in the last, say, 8 years, they were living under very severe sanctions by the US, by the European Commission. And everybody, if you listen to the Europeans, the European Commissioner, sanctions against individuals. This was a big lie. Sanctions were on energy, so you have no energy to pump, make agriculture. You have no energy for heating. You have no energy for having electricity. I was in Damascus a week ago. You have today 1 hour of electricity every 20. And when people have our electricity, it is cut 5 or 6 times. And the joke is, whenever you have the electricity, you will put your refrigerator, your freezer, your washing machine, all the things you need simultaneously. Then it will be cut. So they have in each switch center some guy getting back the electricity, then it goes down and then back. So it's ridiculous. And it is this case for 7 or 8 years. And it's still there, but you have now gasoline everywhere. And the funny thing is that the gasoline is smuggled because the sanctions are on Syria today to have energy. Smuggled from Lebanon and smuggled from Turkey. And this is how this group gets his money to pay his militia, if we want to call it. So the way to go is still complicated in Syria. Would someone wanted to describe it replacing a secular but stupid dictator by a jihadi Islamic dictator? The choice is not very evident, but the people are happy today. They are even drunk, like we say in Arabic, from getting out the old dictator who was really crazy. And this one is saying nice things, etc. And nobody is looking at what is happening on the ground for other communities than Sunni. The Sunni communities are happy that we actually have a Sunni dictator. But what's the point without it? The Syrian story, if we get back to the origin, it is a revolution like in many other places, Tunisia, Sudan, Egypt, from social economic model. You have to imagine a comparison with Europe after World War II. You have a baby, people were making children, so population increase was very high, and then this wave of baby boom would get what is called the youth population in 1968. making the revolution, making the hippie movement. But this was after having in Europe the Marshall Plan, etc., and having economy. Here you are having the same thing in the Mediterranean Arab countries, and with rural-urban migration, accelerating. So it was very difficult to stop the youth movement and to talk with the youth. If we were in 2011 when the Syrian young people wanted to race against the regime, they came to me and say, we want to overthrow the regime, but we don't want to talk politics. How do you overthrow the regime without talking politics? We will get down the regime to its very earthy basis. No. If you don't have half of the military, half of their basis with you, you will lose. And this is what this was the revolution. But I still tease them, saying that the revolution is something that brings new human value. If a revolution is only overthrowing the regime, whatever is the regime, it's not good. If you take the example of the French Revolution is a revolution because of one paper, the Declaration of Human Rights and Citizenship. Unless they were killers, they killed each other. Danton was killed by Robespierre, and Robespierre was, and the king came back. You know, of course, the dictator, Napoleon, made himself an emperor. The revolution is only what brings new values, and new high values for the people. So it's a difficult discussion. But then there is the other aspect, because I say, okay, it's an uprising, but also it is a plot. It is something which is played out. So to get back to this discussion on imperialism, we are facing today multipolar imperialism. Multipolar. When the power system in Tunisia and Egypt were overthrown, Mubarak was backed by the US. Egypt receives only for the military $3 billion of aid every year to have it on the US side. So when the Gulf countries backed by the US saw this, what they did is going white. I can say this. They played the bad things. Qatar is as responsible of the blood and the killing in Syria as Bashar al-Assad. They played it dirty. They brought the Islamists and the jihadists to Syria. They changed, and this is the complexity of understanding the situation. Without Al Jazeera today, you don't hear a lot about what's happening in Gaza. But if you listen to Al Jazeera on the other aspects, it's really a tool to destroy others. They played it in Egypt in the beginning of the revolution, etc. So all this is the play of government, which is also backed by nice British friends. If you imagine their secret services to deal with the Taliban, it's more than they have to have people in the secret services more than the population of how they do. You know, this is a tiny country. It's maybe 2 million today, but 90% of the population are foreigners. But the same thing by the Saudi, the same thing by the Emiratis, each one with his own, say, play or way of playing. including Israel, including the Turkey, which is the only bad multipolar imperialist is Iran. He is not backed by it. And the story of Syria ends with in Lebanon ends with kicking out the bad multipolar imperialists away, now playing with Russia. And you still have only the US-backed multipolar imperialists in the area of Spain. Forget about it. Who is fighting who in Sudan? One part is backed by Saudis and the other part by the Emirates. What is happening in Yemen? You have the Houthis backed by the Iranian, but the south is backed by the UAE, who took all the ports and etc. and the islands, etc. And the north is backed by the south. Who is playing in Libya? You have the east backed by the Saudi and the UAE. They are together in this case, while the west is backed by Turkey and Qatar. So it's a very complex game today. And what is the fate of Syria? Sometimes I joke, it's between the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, and the Great Israel. Israel has behaved on Syria and on Lebanon as it is the strongest tribe in the region. They don't understand the notion of equal citizenship in a multicultural society. They don't want to play because of their ideology. With Lebanon, they a lot on the division between Maronites, Shia, etc. So you have some nice quote, Maronites saying the Shia don't look like them. Imagine that somebody in Ireland talk about any other community, Irish community, especially born and since ever being in Lebanon, they don't look like us because they have another religion. This is pushed by the Israelis. And the Israelis were very active in social media, etc. Not only to threaten in Europe, but in the Middle East, it was horrible. It was horrible in Syria, but it's funny, they entered. They are 20 kilometers away. And because there is components of the Israeli society who played from the beginning with the Haganah and the Zionists, which is the Druze community, or part of the community of Israel. That Israel is protecting now, is the protector of the Druze of Syria. Means you have areas in the south, Golani and Marshalla tried to occupy the government town hall of Sweda, and the police officers sent 40 military cars to take over, and 10 guys, not armed, went in front of the column and say, "You will not enter," and they get back. Doesn't happen like this in Arabic. They went and they killed and they asked people to bark like dogs. Here, because they got a call from Israeli, they you don't touch. And the image of being caught between the Ottoman Empire and the Great Israel is not a joke. It's not a joke for Lebanese, who are after the ceasefire under somehow international protection. You have a general from the Central Command of the US who made his military service in Israel. He has fought who is in charge of the ceasefire issue in Lebanon, and who says to the Lebanese army where to go, where not to go, etc. And especially that because of the financial collapse, this is a long story, of Lebanon in 2019, the Lebanese army is today paid by the US to get their salaries. So they can order whatever. They can nominate a general at the presidency, a nice guy of the national tribunal as prime minister. But in my opinion, that even with the best ability of these two guys, somehow Lebanon had been without the US Israeli boundary. And getting rid of this would be very hard. But they will be more protected as one country in this situation than Syria, where you have multiple factors. You have the US troops in the Kurdish controlled area, where the Kurds are only 20% of the population. It's not because they took much larger area just to take the oil field. And what is funny is that the oil fields in Syria, northeast Syria, are today the US military bases by accident, not one. And this is the way this is Trump kind of behavior. This is the way they finance the presence of the American army by smuggling the oil. Not a very large product for the future. You have the Turks who have military bases, about 60 small bases in Syria, and an army in the north that they control. And that they wanted these guys to kick on the Kurds. There was a big fighting in the last 20 or 30 days. They wanted to enter north of Euphrates and take over. They failed. Because Al-Shara Jolani didn't support them. He is in the middle state between the US and the Turks. He's not 50% British. He is mostly British. By the way, he speaks English with an excellent London accent. Where it comes from. But he is only 42 years old and spent most of his life between ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
And prison.
No, he was not in prison. He was in prison. But, this was very old times. But I don't know, maybe in prison. Yeah. Anyhow, or in the last 5 years with his conflict. Anyhow, the situation in the coastal area, mostly Arabic, is very tense these days. You have militias who are with ISIS, the main militia of Al-Shara, who control some areas and doesn't follow very much what Al-Shara wants. And you have the south with the threat, the Islam. Now, they are trying to make a government. It's they want to push. When they speak to the general public outside, they say nice things, but never saying we will make an equal citizenship state. They keep it ambiguous. They will never say that we want a national conference to agree on the cancel the constitution, and Syria became a state with no law. So go and make a conference to agree on some kind of constitutional document. They keeps going away of it. From time to time, one of the ministers comes and say, "We will apply Sharia. We want all the women judges to go out and stop working." Well, women judges in Syria were there since the early 20th century, before Egypt, before Jordan, before all the Saudis and Gulf countries existed. So kicking out women judges is something very weird. So the society, the civil society, goes and shout at them and they say, and then they back. But they back, all this is in the media, all this is on the discussion, and nothing is made. And there are very funny things. Their militias are paid from Italy, from the stronghold they had before controlling the whole city. They are paid in Turkish lira, US dollars. Now they took over. Their guys are paid, still paid, in something outside Syria by quasi-bank, quasi-things. That is not controlled. It's not the bank of Syria. While the other guys are paid 10 times less as salaries in the old regime-controlled area, but in Syrian pounds. So, and the US don't care how they get rich to make their army, to make their institutions, and etc. The sanctions applied only to Bashar al-Assad and not on these guys. So anyhow, when you see all the political opposition coming now to Syria, and I can come while during the period Bashar couldn't come, so it's been 13 years for seeing back again. When you go to the politicians, they go to coffee shop where they put songs. Nobody made any offering, even lectures. What is the point of making a festivity in the coffee shop and singing and making a picture? And so you saw a civil society without really political organization. And how sustainable will the fight of the civil society against imposing a Sharia state or a dictatorship by the new rulers is a big question. So how to resist, how to help the people to resist. While the new rulers are surely much more smarter than Bashar al-Assad, who used to be anyone who can speak, do anything. But again, this is a project of new jihadi Sharia dictatorship, and what I'm afraid of is the sustainability of the resistance of the civil society. Why this is linked to Palestine? Palestine is still a value in Syria, of the fight against everything which is unfair. Remember that for Syrians, Palestine is part of the imagined Syria before it was split by Sykes people. I have family in Palestine myself, so they are linked. Since 1956, Palestinians in Syria and in Syria alone, among Arab countries, have the same rights as the Syrians. Can be ministers, can be ministers since 1956, but not presidents. They have a special passport, like the Syrian passport, with peace. So it's not giving citizenship. So it's still in the Syrian mind something very important. But it's more important than that because it is fighting for the Palestinians is also saying all these multipolar imperialists. Turkey, what did you do besides making big declarations for Gaza? You Turkey was transmitting products and vegetables and etc. to Israel during the whole war. It didn't stop. What UAE made for the Palestinians? Zero. While their television, UAE, Qatar, not Qatar, not Al Jazeera, but the others, and Saudi Arabia were putting the Israeli generals explaining how they are playing with Palestine. So fighting for Palestine and for Gaza for resistance and for the right of the Palestinians is putting all these multipolar imperialists facing their own society. Facing their own society. Even Egypt, what even Egypt? The only place in the Arab countries, and I cannot put Sophia on the street in Saudi Arabia or the UAE, you will get arrested. But the only place where the boycott is going, Carrefour, Starbucks, out Egypt, because of the boycott, is Egypt. It's unprecedented. Most of the boats of the night have this like in some places here, the Palestinian flag, but it's the popular thing. But Sisi, the new dictator, is telling the Egyptians, don't move, you will be like Syrians. So fighting for Palestine is essential, not only for the Palestinians, but for all the Arab countries. Thank you so much.